So this past few weeks, we've been talking a lot about Vietnam. But through all these countries I've talked about recently, there's one country in Southeast Asia we haven't talked about much, Malaysia. Now, before we get started, I have to kind of ask a question because apparently I don't know where Malaysia is. From my understanding, it's in Southeast Asia. I was told that it's not. So leave a comment below. Where is Malaysia? Where is Malaysia? So we got to spend 6, kind of felt like short months in Malaysia. And today I want to share with you like my overall experience and my thoughts of our time in Malaysia in those 6 months. And the first spot to start off with is obviously the first thing you encounter in Malaysia, and that's the people. In general, the people were actually really chill. They were super nice people. And the best part of it is it didn't have that Vietnam vibe where it was like me. Like people were actually caring about other people. And this was seriously a massive change that we were excited to experience. It made Malaysia 100% better first day experience. Now the people in general were really nice, but there was something that we started noticing really fast on day 1, and that was the narcissism. Now, loving your country and being proud, patriotic and all that stuff, that's a great thing. I am too for my own country, but I felt like in Malaysia, it went too far. And this wasn't just something I felt. This was something other tourists were bringing up randomly without even it being brought up. And it really came down to Malaysia was perfect. If we said anything in question that kind of skewed off from that idea, it was always, where are you from? And we'd be like, we're from America. And the first response was, well, you know, in America, this is wrong, and this is why we do this, and this is why America's bad. And this happened with everything. I remember we were in the Capitol, we got some pizza, and it was labeled American pizza. And we got it, and the waitress asked, like, hey, where are you guys from? We're like, oh, from America. It's like, oh, what do you guys think about the American pizza? We were honest. We're like, it's really good. It doesn't taste American. It has that really nice Malaysian flavor to it. I love it, man. We really love it. And immediately, instead of being like, oh, well, thank you, it was more of a, well, you know, maybe America could learn how we cook it and they would do it better. And it was just like, what? And after a while, we just kind of learned. When people ask, hey, what do you think about Malaysia? We just say we love it, we carry on, or we just start speaking Japanese or Spanish. So we just don't put ourselves in that position no more because we know where that conversation always ends up. And on one of my videos, I got this comment, quite long. I'm not going to read it, but I will put it on the screen. Pause the video if you want to read through this. This will give you kind of an idea of what we're talking about when it comes to the narcissism. And if you are Malaysian watching this, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you will be, just understand Western people don't like to travel to new countries, explore new cultures, and just be lectured on how bad their own country is. No country is perfect, neither is yours. And there's just things we deal with. So this is just something we dealt with. A lot of other tourists, expats, and we've met a couple of teachers that kind of brought this up without us mentioning it. And they're just like, you just get used to it. So either way, let's move on from the people. Let's get over to the culture. So Malaysia is an Islamic state with a lot of Hindu on the side. And this is very important because these religions actually affect a lot of the days and how things happen in Malaysia. And they're important to know. Just like in Thailand, Buddhism is a big part of the culture to the point where Buddhist days will actually lock down alcohol, lock down businesses, and have national holidays based off the religion. And in Malaysia, it's the same thing. And this is something that we learned very fast because our first trip into Malaysia, it was Ramadan. And needless to say, everything was closed. And this was the night markets, the street markets, the food, like the food court things, the shopping, the malls, everything was closed until like nighttime. And even at nighttime, it was just like a ghost town. We did notice though, like outside of the holidays, nothing really opened until like 9 a.m. Now the exception to this is if you find like a Chinese area or an Indian area, they're typically open at 5 or 6 a.m. And speaking of waking up late, this must mean that they go to sleep late. And let's talk about the nightlife. The nightlife in Malaysia is a very limited thing. Nothing really actually stays open late. In places like the capital, like the party areas where the tourists go, everything shuts down like at 9 or 10. And this is on a Friday, Saturday night. Now, an exception to that is we did find Malacca. This was the only spot that we found that had kind of like a nightlife, where things stayed open till 10, 11, 12 o'clock, till the morning time on the riverside. And again, because of the religion status of the country, drinking isn't a very big thing. This is actually the first time we traveled through Asia and didn't see a bunch of drunks. However, if you are looking for like a nightlife, a party life, your best bet again is to just find like the Chinese or the Indian areas. You'll find all kinds of cool stuff out there. I will say, if you're not drinking a lot, this gives you a lot of time to travel. There's a lot to see in Malaysia. Take advantage of it. There's no need to get drunk through it all. And once you get out of the capital, you start realizing how amazing Malaysia really is. Now, while we were in Malaysia, we did a lot of traveling. This was mostly through the buses, the trains, and just doing walking. Unlike the rest of Asia, we didn't do a lot of car driving or motorbike driving. And let me tell you why. The bus system in Malaysia is amazing. Living in Vietnam for so long, I'm used to the sleeper buses being loud, full of smoke, noisy, people pushing, the driving is chaotic, it's constant honking. They got those bright lights always on inside the bus. Like, they call them sleeper buses, but you literally can't sleep in them. This was nothing that we saw in Malaysia. And one of my favorite parts about Malaysian bus system is they use the highway. Once you get on the bus, they pick up all the people. It pretty much goes out of the main city, jumps on a highway, goes to the next town. It takes about 2 or 3 hours to go town to town. Where in Vietnam, the bus was constantly stopping to pick people up or pick up products because they're acting like the postal service. None of that happens in Malaysia, which is really cool. And on top of that, the cost of the bus system is ridiculously cheap. From all the way from Penang all the way down to Johor, we spent about $55 per person for the entire trip. And then our second means of transportation was the train. The train system is awesome. The train stations are super clean. It's not full of vendors harassing you, and the train is always on time. Now, I will give you a warning about the train. Remember, this is a Islam state country, so there are going to be cars that are women only. Don't go on these. I accidentally walked onto one because it was empty. We were actually trying to record on the train, and we didn't want to get other people into the video and the footage, so we're like, this train's empty, let's use it. So we got onto it, and then we were quickly pulled off of it. And it wasn't a rude interaction, just like, hey, this is for the Muslim women only. Please, can you go to the next one? I respect that. They were really nice about it because we were just stupid tourists. We didn't know that. And there was a big advert on the side of the train, so it kind of covered up the side that says women only. Now, I will say the only problem we have is every train line has its own card, actual payment card. And there's 13 of them in the capital. And we ended up having 13 different cards depending on where we went. We traveled a lot by train while we were in the city. And it was frustrating because we always brought the wrong card, apparently. It would be nice if they did Thailand with BTS, where it's just one card for everything. The reason this was annoying is because we ended up losing $60-some because it was just, we had a bunch of cards with $4 or $5 on each of them. The airports are what they are. They're pretty basic. They're pretty chill. There's domestic and international. We found that the actual bus system was better. And the reason for that is the airport, you have to be there a couple hours early. You have to go through customs. You have to go through x-ray, all this stuff. It was literally faster just to go to a bus station. Planning your trip around the buses is almost twice as fast than actually taking a flight. Now, if you're leaving the country or if you're going to the other island of Malaysia, obviously you're going to have to take a plane. Now, when it came to the cars and bikes, I said that we didn't really do that. There was, again, no reason. The taxis, you can use Grab out there. I will say something about the cars and the bikes of Malaysia, is everyone has those stupid fart cans on their bikes and cars. So you hear all this all the time. And it's every car that has it is slow. Malaysia, that stuff was never cool. The weather. In Malaysia, when it rains, it pours. When it's hot, you are being cooked. And when the thunderstorm comes, it is loud. And I mean loud as in you can feel it in the ground. Be ready for the worst. Because it never just sprinkles, it dumps. But I will give Malaysia some credit. When it was raining in Malacca, it was 4 days straight. It was just insane. After the rain stopped, we got outside, the roads were not flooded. There wasn't trash floating everywhere. It was clean. It was taken care of. It did not remind me of being in another country. Yeah, you. And speaking of pollution, let's talk about that. The capital, of course, is going to be smoggy. It's the capital. It's busy there. But there wasn't trash all over the place when you were at the capital. It was quite clean. But I will say, when we were in the capital and when we were going to different Hindu temples, they were always extremely dirty. Never understood why. People were just sitting in trash, throwing stuff all over the ground, and they were all dirty. So I don't understand that part. But outside of the Hindu temple areas and whatnot, the country's overall rather clean. The only time that we saw pollution was in Penang. We were at the pier. The water, in the pier area was just covered in oil and plastic and stuff. That's a weird spot to have it because that's where all the tourists are. But maybe that's why it's dirty. I don't know. And then when we got to this island on the other side of Malaysia, and we walked off the beaten path, and there was just It was like a landfill of trash. It was like unorganized and they were burning it. But it is an island, so I get that. But overall, the pollution in Malaysia is 100% more well maintained than you would ever see in like Vietnam, per se. Now, the last part, it's not so much pollution, but it is something to talk about, is smoking is heavy in Malaysia. Like everything smelled like cigarette smoke. Like, and even in like the 5-star hotels, they had like no smoking areas, but you could see on the wall it was yellow from the smoking. Like it was insane. We noticed in the capital it's not that bad, but once we got out to like the other cities, it got extremely bad. Like Johor was actually the most notable one. That entire city smells like a cigarette. I don't understand why. But we don't go to Malaysia for the cigarette smoke. We go there for the food. Now, when it comes to the food of Malaysia, it is overly diverse. So you got Western food, you got Asian food. It is all kinds of it from everywhere. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. While I was in Malaysia, I didn't eat a lot of Malaysian food. I didn't eat a lot of Western food. I was addicted to the Indian and the Chinese food. It is so good. It is real. Like, there's no kung pao chicken in Malaysia. It was all authentic. It was so good. But I will tell you, if you love spicy Indian food, Malaysia is the best way to do it. You have to go to Malacca. Malacca is a literal food town. It's got every food you can imagine, and it's endless. Their night market is literally a food market. Like, you can sometimes buy a pair of shoes, but you have to get past like the 700 different food stalls. It is insanely good food. And when it comes to the cost of food in Malaysia, outside of the capital, like $2 or $3 a meal. Eat what the locals eat. It is actually better to do that because the food's way better. Don't get that tourist garbage. And speaking of being a tourist, where do you go? Obviously, you have to go to the capital for the Twin Towers. You have to do that. It's a cool thing to go. And for you guys wondering, what is that tower thing? Inside of it, like the first like 5 levels are malls. Above that is business offices. There's a huge open park. It's got like a water area and stuff like that for the kids. It's almost better than the tower spot itself. Like, it's just, Malaysia, you did good, man. It's like they put this thing like, come Malaysia, see the towers. And then when you get to the towers, it's like the towers weren't even the coolest part. It was the park and the mall and all that stuff. But check out all the spots. There's so much tourism stuff out there to do. There's a lot of stuff to see, like history, culture, that you can explore out there. And I want to give you like 5 spots that we went and why that we found them. So forgive my pronunciation of these names, but we had Batu Fahat with there for the Chinese culture. That literally felt like we were in Taiwan again. And the food there, I think, was some of the best Chinese food we had in all of Malaysia. Johor, this is the second biggest city in all of Malaysia. It's all the way south. It borders Singapore. The reason this was nice is because it was more Western tourist friendly compared to KL, and there's a lot more going on. The third one is Malacca, and this is for the food. If you are a food person, Mark Wings, if you're watching this, go to Malacca. You will lose your mind on how much food there is there, how good it is. Malacca has to be my favorite city in all of Asia for food. Now, when it comes to the beach life you want to travel, you guys know I'm from Hawaii originally. I like beaches. There's 2 of them. Penang Island, Georgetown, I think is a better word for it, is way up northwest. It's right near Thailand area. That's a nice spot to go if you're just looking for a quick like weekend getaway. Now, if you're looking for a longer break, a beautiful beach. I told you earlier how we found this landfill on the island. This is the island. It's called Pulau Perhentian, is that how you say it? I probably messed that up. But this island is awesome. It was beautiful. It's separated into different spots. So you have like an Islam island where it has like the mosque. And then you have a big tourist island. You have a fishing island. It's an amazing spot to go. We ended up going there for like 7 or 8 days. Like, we ended up getting hotels like for 4 days and then go to another island, go to another island. And it was just an amazing thing to experience. And finally, this is a town called Kuantan. I'm destroying these names. But if I was to retire in Malaysia, this would be the town. It just felt like the West, but it wasn't busy. And it had a very big, diverse group. Those are like my 5 main cities. If I go back to Malaysia, those are where I'm going to be. Now, being a tourist, you're going to have fees. And sometimes you're going to be surprised by fees. And it's typically random. Like Vietnam, you get white tax where they just charge you extra for a pineapple. And you go to Thailand, and there's like, if you go to a temple, if you're not Thai, you have to pay a tax. They enter the temple. In Malaysia, they actually have a hotel fee. So every day that you stay in a hotel, you have to pay 10 MYR. So it's like $250 per day. This is per day per person. So if you're in there with a family of 5, do the math. And when I talked about earlier about people complaining about Malaysia, this was actually one of the bigger complaints, is this tax. And we met this French family, we were in Malacca actually, and we were at this Spanish resort. And it was a family of 5 or 6, I forgot. But they came out, their plan was to stay out for it was like 6 or 8 weeks or something like that. And they ended up cutting their trip in half down to a month. But they're like, we ended up spending an extra like $900 to $1,000 on hotel tax fees that we weren't expecting. Like, we didn't know that was a thing. And when I first came to Malaysia, I didn't know it was a thing. It's not really talked about on tourist sites or anything like that. So do keep that in mind. This is a real thing. A couple $1,000s of unexpected fees while you're traveling abroad with your family can really change everything. If you want to avoid the tax, Airbnb is a good way to go. And then in regards to shopping, the food marks, buying clothes, stuff like that, the cost for a lot of this stuff is the same as if you were in Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand. It's very cheap. And one thing I can't forget about, you guys know if you're in Asia, you get the little poop gun, right? You have it in the bathroom. The problem with Malaysia, though, is they don't have the gun piece on it. They only have the hose. So you have this, like, dirty-ass hose that's barely shooting water out, and you're supposed to, like, shove it in. And this wasn't just in one spot. This was in the capital. This was at 5-star hotels. This was everywhere. For some reason, Malaysia does not like to use the gun part. They only have the hose. And it's literally one of the most disgusting things I've seen in Asia, next to how Vietnam cleans their food. So, with that being said, I think we've come to the end of this video today. So I want to talk about kind of 2 things. 1, what if you want to live here long term? And 2, what do I really think? Now, if you are going to stay here long term, the benefit is you don't pay that tax. Now, another thing is English is quite big in Malaysia. Most people do speak English, and when we got to like the village areas where it's mostly Chinese and Indian, they even do a good amount of English. So if you are coming out here, you're gonna be okay if you don't want to learn Malaysian or Chinese or Indian. You're never gonna be lost where it's like you don't know how to communicate with nobody. It's never gonna be an issue. Now, when it comes to the culture of how Malaysia is, I know this is gonna annoy some people, but a lot of the girls were complaining that they felt uncomfortable with the resorts and the beaches. So you're at a resort, you pay money. It's a resort, you guys obviously know. It's just a hotel that has its own like city within, right? And within that city, you have pools, you have private beach access, stuff like that. And a lot of the girls, like the French and German, European girls, are out there in their bikinis. And as you know, this is an Islam state nation. And a lot of the Muslim women were out there, and they had their entire thing on while they're swimming, goggles and everything on. And it's whatever, like, we're not complaining. I never heard one Western person complain about it or say anything about it. It was just like, it's the culture, we understand. But when you flip the table a little, a lot of the girls were getting mocked. They were being harassed by the other women, saying like, how can you wear that? Like, I understand tourists come to Malaysia, we should respect the culture. I get that. But it was mocking, it was insulting, it was glaring at them, kind of dirty. So that was one thing that women dealt with, so that is something to keep in mind. And then for the guys, it was mostly boredom. Most guys were bored. They all kind of said the same thing, like, there's nothing to do out here, it's so boring. Like, the first week is cool, you got food, you got shopping, but like, there's no bars, there's no nightlife, there's no pickup scene, there's no like hookup scene in Malaysia. Like, none of this stuff really exists. And it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's bad. This is actually a really good thing if you're living there long term. And past that, the immigration is the only other thing. Malaysia does have a nomad visa. I believe they're finishing it at the time of this video. But besides the nomad visa, Malaysia has a cutoff of 6 months. But if you're living here long term, you will have to find something to do the other 6 months. Thailand has the same rule. So you could technically go between Malaysia and Thailand back and forth. They do border each other. You do 6 months of Thailand and then 6 months in Malaysia. That could be your retirement life. But overall, Malaysia is definitely way more chilled back than a lot of Asia. It's definitely a better spot long term, and you have so many options. You have the beach life, you have the city life, you have the farm life, you have the markets, you have everything. But you also have that westernized calmness, that quietness. The cars aren't honking all the time. There's not constant yelling all the time. People go to bed at reasonable times. There's not karaoke every day. Your neighbors not screaming in their houses all the time. Like, this stuff just doesn't happen in Malaysia, which makes it an ideal spot to long-term live in Malaysia. So it is what it is. So if you're young, you're looking for parties, you're looking for fun, Malaysia is probably not going to be the best spot to designate your entire trip for. If you're older, looking for something calm, bring your family, minus the tax issue. Again, Airbnb will avoid all that. But if you are coming out with your family to kind of chill out, show your children, your family, like an Asian culture that's not chaotic like Vietnam or Thailand, Malaysia is definitely a spot to go. One of my top 5 countries in Asia. So, till then, guys, I will see you again.